Can everybody hear me all right? Great. Well, thanks for coming to campus. We're thrilled that you're with us today. Don asked me to speak a little bit about my experience in over 15 years of secular fundraising and what I've come to understand and know about stewardship through that lens. But before I do that, I thought it'd be good to help you understand how I got here. This is me and my dad. I grew up on a dairy farm in North Dakota, 5-generation dairy farm. I'm the youngest of 6 kids in a Mennonite family. And my parents, I cannot underestimate the power they had in my Christian faith formation, and particularly my father. My father was foundational. First, my dad taught me how to pray. One of my very first memories of my father was the two of us sharing a bedtime prayer. He prayed first, and then it was my turn to model after him. Only extemporaneous prayers were allowed in our household. At the dinner table, he would pick somebody to say a prayer. Sometimes he would ask my mom. I would sweat bullets, hoping he didn't pick me, because to pray in front of my siblings or the friend who was sleeping over, oh my goodness, what if he picked my friend? But let me tell you, I learned how to pray, and I learned how important it was in my relationship with God on a daily basis. My dad also taught me how to read the Bible, and I mean how to really, really read the Bible. As a family, we read the Bible together every day. He encouraged us to dive deep, to be curious, to explore the historical context of a passage we were reading. He never squashed my off-the-wall questions, and if I had periods of doubt, he knew it was in those moments that my faith would grow. My dad taught me how to read the Bible. And my dad taught me about witness. He taught me, I learned from him, that my actions and the examples of how I lived my life were far greater than any words I could ever muster up about God's transformative work, love and work in my life. His examples, his skills that he taught me ranged from forgiveness to humility, frugalness, humbleness. They all played a daily role in my journey and my walk with Christ. Dad taught me how to see God's abundance and to give thanks for that abundance. As a farmer, many of you who live across rural America will know farmers do this really, really well. He saw God's abundance in the alfalfa fields and the cornfields and the dairy barn. He saw it in literature, in art, and in music, in the seasons, in the storms. He pointed it out on a daily basis. He couldn't help but be overwhelmed by God's goodness and see it in everyone and everything, from his family around the dining room table to the stranger on the street. And he gave thanks, and he taught me how to give thanks too. And finally, my dad taught me how to give. Now, my dad gave generously. He believed passionately that this was his call and necessary expression of his faith, of his Christian faith. He was the kind of guy who would give till it hurt, and then just to annoy my mom, he'd give a little bit more. Whether it was his alma mater, certainly our congregation, Mennonite international organizations, but my alma mater, his alma mater, Doctors Without Borders, Amnesty International, UNICEF, the list went on and on and on. My dad gave, and he gave until it hurt. Oh, before I go there, I want to say a little bit about what occurred 24 years after this picture was taken. So after grad school, it's behind me, I find myself stumbling into this career of professional fundraising. It was purely by accident, but what I discovered is that I absolutely loved it. I started with arts organizations, I moved to healthcare, went back to the arts, went back to healthcare for a while. And I think everybody, my husband, myself, my parents, were surprised that I loved this so much. It's kind of a weird thing to ask people for money and to enjoy it. There aren't many out there who really do like it, but I really do. When my dad passed away 8 years ago, it dawned on me why I do like this so much. It's because I get to hang out with people like him. People who view their philanthropy as stewardship, as that manifestation and expression of their Christian faith. 75% of philanthropy in the United States is religiously motivated. I'm going to come back to that, but don't forget, 75% For 15 years now, almost 20, I have sat across the table from people just like my parents, and especially like my dad. They've invited me in to their journeys, their hopes, their dreams, their prayers, and their imagination of what God is calling them to do in their lives. Now, I have a confession. This isn't anything that I'm proud of, but I think it's important for you to understand and know. As a professional fundraiser, working for secular organizations, I worked really, really hard to compartmentalize my professional and private life. My professional life was 8 to 5, some evenings and weekends, fundraising for important causes. My personal life was my family, my Christian faith, my personal well-being. So when my congregations would run their annual stewardship campaigns, I hid in the corner. I signed up for my monthly recurring contribution from my checking account, but I really didn't want anything to do with the extra tithing envelopes, the stewardship dinners, the stewardship committees, all that stuff. I did that 8 to 5. I thought, nope, that's my professional life, my personal life, my Christian faith. This is something different. That all came crashing down on me about 4 years ago when Luther Seminary called. I was really, really nervous about combining these two aspects of my life that I had conveniently kept separate. God had a different plan. He plucked me up, he put me here, and said, you belong here. And I do believe that. The last 3 years have been an incredible roller coaster, a ton of fun, and if I ever thought I hadn't met so many people like my father, you can't even imagine the folks that are investing in this place day in and day out. It's amazing. So when I came here, though, by about the second day, I thought, oh my gosh, that's right. Lutherans talk about stewardship in a completely different way than people do in secular fundraising. What were all those things in those stewardship sermons I had been avoiding all these years, right? So it didn't take me long to figure it out. There's two definitions here of stewardship. The one that we all know well, right? That in religious fundraising, God is at the center of everything. These aren't our gifts, they're God's gifts. And our giving is a crucial manifestation of expressing our Christian faith. But in the secular fundraising world, stewardship takes on a different meaning. It's actually a tangible set of actions we do to communicate with the donor after they've made a gift, to share with them the impact that gift made and what we were able to accomplish with their investment. And we do that in the hopes that we develop a stronger relationship with that donor so we can go back and ask for another gift, and the relationship gets stronger and stronger. Now, on the secular side, it does look like this. So you start at the top, the cultivation, after the donor's been identified and qualified, and this is the relationship building period. This is when you understand and learn about their interests, their passions, and then you begin to share information about your mission, and you find where they intersect. And it's only through deep listening, deep engagement, and deep relationship building that you can find that sweet spot. When you get there, you ask for the gift, it's the right person, asking at the right time, for the right amount, all of that. There is always a solicitation follow-up phase, whether it's an annual gift and you have to ask a couple times before people respond, or if it's a significant gift and there's a negotiation that happens, there's always that period. But when you get to the gift agreement, for a secular fundraiser, that's when stewardship kicks in. That's when you begin to communicate what you're accomplishing, the tangible difference that donor made. The line that goes back to cultivation, it's a very gray space between stewardship and cultivation. You are actually right back in cultivation phase in the hopes that the donor had such a meaningful experience making that gift to your mission that when you come back around and ask for the next gift, it's going to be even bigger and greater and make even a larger difference. Now, what's fascinating to me as I thought about this, they really aren't that different of definitions, but it's about who's at the center, who's at the source of the gift. And in religious fundraising, clearly God is at the center, and God should be. But for a secular organization, the Minnesota Orchestra, Phoenix Children's Hospital, two places where I worked, the source of the gift is the donor themselves. Now, I propose that our donors actually see this as a both and we would serve ourselves well, and our missions well, and our ministries well if we considered it that way too. Let me explain a little bit why I feel that way. So this pie you've probably seen. This is the 2017 total charitable giving in the United States, came out from Giving USA last month. Last year, $410 billion was given to charity. Now, 31% of that went to religion. And Giving USA says religion are places of worship and denominational institutions like a seminary. Your parachurch organizations, human services, international relief, other institutions are going to fall into one of the other pie sections. So since Giving USA has been tracking this data since 1977, religion has always had the biggest slice of the pie. But that's not what's most interesting about this pie. In 2017, Giving USA came out with a special report on giving to religion. And they found 75% of all donations made in the United States have come from a religious motivation. 75% are given by an individual who is expressing their Christian faith. $300 billion last year was given with that motivation in mind. Think about what this pie would look like if there was no stewardship. It would be very different. We're making a huge difference. But this is not fundraising for the faint of heart in religion. It's been a tough road the last 3 decades. So the chart you're looking at here is the percentage given to religion every year going back to 1985. So in 1985, 53% of all charitable donations given went to places of worship or their denominational organizations. Last year, it was an all-time low of 31%. I think we can all in this room come up with a list of reasons why this is happening, why this trend is occurring. I personally have no desire to go back to the glory days of 1985, but I do think we need to be thoughtful about the future and what the trends and the changing landscape in stewardship mean for the future of our ministries, and frankly, the entire philanthropic sector, if in fact 75% of all donations, no matter where they're going, are coming from a religious motivation. So this is a chart that's been getting a lot of screen time at Luther Seminary the past year. It comes from Robert Jones's book, The End of White Christian America. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not. But you can see, as you go down the graph, you start with 65 and older at the top, and with each age group, the affiliation, religious affiliation, begins to decline. So you've got 86% of folks 65 or older with a religious affiliation. You have folks at the bottom there, just over half. So a significant decline. Our young folks are not, as we know, do not have the same religious affiliation that their older generations do. This matters. The number one predictor for philanthropic intent, somebody's willingness to give money, is if they attend worship on a regular basis. It's a proven fact. Giving USA has found it. And let me share a story with you and how I've come to experience this. When I worked for the Minnesota Orchestra, I worked there for a decade, we ran a discovery program where we would go out and meet prospective major donors to the orchestra. These were cold calls, folks either who were giving very, very small gifts and we've never met them before, or they've never given a gift and somebody thought it'd be a good idea to meet with them and they agreed to meet. So I trained our gift officers to go out and get answers to 4 questions. The first question I needed them to answer was, we have some reason to believe this person has wealth and personal capacity. Is that true? The second question they have to have an answer to is this person connected to our mission in some way? Third, do they have an affinity for our mission? Do they care about what we do? And the fourth question is the most important. Do they have the philanthropic intent to make a major gift to our organization within 3 years? Now, these are questions you do not sit across the table from somebody and say, well, Byron, according to our records, you have $50 million in net worth. No, is that true? No, you don't do that. You suss this information out through a conversation. You infer, you get indicators. But what I trained the team was, when it comes to philanthropic intent, find out if they worship on a regular basis. Are they a member of a synagogue? Where do they go to church? Because if they do, their philanthropic intent goes through the roof. If they don't, you have reason to walk out of there and not think that they're a prospect. I knew that even back then, working for the orchestra, the most secular of secular institutions. Folks who worshiped on a regular basis were the source of all giving. So what is this going to look like? What does this mean for a younger generation that's not sitting in the pew? What's going to happen when they replace the baby boomer generation? What is that going to mean for that entire philanthropic pie, where 75% is motivated by religion, by faith, by Christian faith, expression of Christian faith? Now, there's some good news here. Generation X, baby boomers, and the mature generation still give more money to places of worship than any other type of institution. So through my generation, Gen X, we're going to be okay. But what about that younger generation? A good chunk of them are religiously affiliated. I think you can wonder, what's their participation in worship life? That does matter. But there's some interesting indicators of what's interesting to them and how God is calling them to give. So I'll share a story. I was talking to a family friend recently about this little talk and what I was preparing, and he shared a story with me. He said, well, when I think back to my congregation, my grandparents went there, my parents went there, I was confirmed there. They do amazing work, great work. They feed the hungry, they clothe the naked. It's amazing. But I gotta tell you, I'm sitting here wondering what's wrong with the system that causes that person to be hungry and naked in the first place. I'm not interested in giving where it's just gonna help somebody navigate a broken system. I wanna fix the system. And if my congregation would do that, I'm all in. That is the way the younger generation is thinking. That's how God is calling them, I think, how the Spirit is moving through them. And as a church, are we ready for them? I think that's the question we need to be asking as we move through the trends and the changing landscape of philanthropy. So I go back to our definitions. Again, I think this is a both and don't get me wrong, God is at the center. God stays at the center, period. And let's do some work to put our donors in the equation too. What do they care about? What difference do they want to make? Where do they feel called? Where do they think your ministry is called to make a systemic difference in your county, on your block, in your neighborhood, or across the globe? There are so many institutions, organizations that we can collaborate and partner with to create that systemic change. But I think if we're going to hold on to the philanthropic tradition we have in this country that is built on stewardship, we're going to have to change the way that we approach this. Now, finally, I wanted to leave you with a couple resources. Now, I'll start with the one in the middle. Has anybody heard of the Whiny Donor on Twitter? Nobody? Okay, if you want to get in the heads of the people that are fueling your mission, follow her on Twitter. The Whiny Donor is a self-proclaimed baby boomer living somewhere in the Midwest. She's very good about maintaining a lot of anonymity. She is on 2 different boards, serves on multiple fundraising committees, and is a terrific volunteer fundraiser. I wish I got a chance to work with her. She tweets on a daily basis about her experiences giving money away. She doesn't talk about the types of organizations she gives to. She never, ever lets on. But she's funny, and she's brutally honest. She will tell you exactly what she thinks of your fundraising appeal, your campaign, all of those things, and it really helps get you in the mindset of what your donors are thinking and, frankly, what they want. So, if you're on Twitter, follow the Whiny Donor. You won't regret it. On the left is a book that came out just in the last year. It is written by 2 millennials, and it's all about what the millennial generation is looking for, the kind of impact that they want to make with their philanthropic gifts. Now, I want to be clear about this book. I don't agree with everything in it. There is some millennial nonsense in there. God bless them. It is not a roadmap of how to get young donors into your ministry and into your church. But what it does do is give you the lens of what that generation is looking for. And how the landscape, it helps you imagine how the landscape is going to change in the coming years and the coming generations. Here at Luther Seminary, the fundraising committee of the board of directors is going to read this book together this year to begin imagining and exploring and use it to facilitate a conversation of how we need to be thoughtful and open to God's call through this next generation of supporters. And then finally, on the right, that is Giving USA's special report on giving to religion that came out last fall. Pick it up, you can Google it, download it, it's free, it's a good read, and it's really going to help put in perspective where you fit within the whole ecosystem. Thank you.